Good evening, everyone. You're welcome once again to another class on research. This is IMG Research Academy. In IMG Research Academy, we do all things research, from consulting to coming together to put our heads together to figure out how to make these things easy. Research is a topic that is sometimes very boring if you're not interested in it, but uh, it can also be very interesting. It helps our patients, helps us in various ways. People do clinical research or research writing or research methodologies or whatever aspect of research you are for different reasons. In IMG Research Academy, many of us are physicians, and then we're focusing on research for either career growth or how to improve our patient care. We have been having series of talks to demystify this thing they call clinical research, um, and make it easier. Part of the ways we'll function is to come together as a group, either in groups of 10 or in groups of 20s, and then figure out a topic and get that topic done. That topic is aimed to either help our patient population or to help our career growth, or do both functions at the same time. We bring experts to give us different talks at different times. So sometimes we don't even have. Today, we're going to continue the series of talks that we've been having. Give me one moment. Let me see if I can put my microphone on so that I can pick. Okay. Right. The quality controls I was supposed to do. Okay. So we've had different topics and how to conceptualize an idea, how to write a research paper, what are the statements that you make, how to generate, databases, how to analyze. We talked about systematic reviews, talked about so many things. Last week, we dealt on, not last week, last 2 weeks, we dealt on the process of a simple literature review, right? And then we'll say we're going to be stepping up. Today, we're going to deal on systematic review. And then in the next session, we're going to talk about actually analyzing the data. I also spoke to someone who's very proficient with use of Excel spreadsheet, because something we noticed that in doing clinical research, you have to have some competency outside just medicine, using tools like Excel spreadsheet, using tools like Strata, data manipulating or data processing tools and all these softwares. Um, Before I jump into the topic, which is systematic review, it's going to be like 30 minutes and it's going to be very conversational. Nothing out of the ordinary from what you can find in the literature. And there are tons of tools and tons of references that you could do or that you could make out there to help you with the process of systematic review to understand it better. Before I go into this, I want to say something that is very pertinent. The world is advancing. I'm one of those people who are proponents of embracing the advances, especially in technology. In the 1960s, 1940s, 1950s, we usually
Mustafa,
use manual tools to design and develop research, right? But these days, a lot of AIs have come into play, a lot of tools that will make our referencing tools to make life easier. So things are becoming a lot more easier. The talk today is not going to focus on these AIs because it's still a controversial topic. Teachers and the professors who went to school in the 60s and the 50s have a lot of bias against this. That's what I've seen in the industry. They have a lot of bias against those tools, right? Because somehow it makes your life easier. Like in one click, you could generate a paper. In another click, you generate citations. In another click, you could do this, you could do that. Life is advancing. While I encourage people to embrace this because I share this opinion that it's not going to get better. These new modern advances in AIs are going to continue driving, everything. With right now, I could sit down and say, "Hey, Alexa, shut down my fridge," and my fridge shuts down, right? So if we decide to live in the 60s and the 70s, still good. But I kind of encourage everyone to, learn these modern tools. Having said that, you really cannot do much and better learning modern tools if you don't actually know the basics, the background basics. That is the foundation of how a systematic review is done. What is a systematic review? Why did they even call it systematic? What is the review about? What is it about, right? So the focus of today is to go to the basics and just say, okay, let me know the basics. Then your version 2.0, version 3.0, whatever version you want to upgrade yourself. Now you've already known the basics. You can know how to, if you are not that ethical classification that believe that, oh, I need to use an AI to drive my research. Oh, that's fine. Then you can now know how, because even when you want to use those AIs, you have to know how to drive the conversation. You have to know how to put the prompts. You have to know what AIs you want to use and what is allowed and what is not allowed in your field. All right. So the focus of today is to go to the basics. Just talk about the basics. I'm not going to focus on any AI, and I'm not going to do any recommendation for any AI while being recorded. And then you can now go and, step up depending on what ethical platform or ethical concept or belief that you believe in. So we'll jump straight into what is a systematic review. I will be asking this question over and over again because my Zoom seems to be fluctuating on and off. I just want to be sure that people can see the slide that says a systematic review essentials. Correct?
Yes, we can see.
Okay. All right. So a brief the talking points that I want to talk about, like the outline, is this. There are different types of review, and I've gone through them. There's the simple review, there's the different layers of reviews here and there. The scoping review, the simple review, and then the systematic review. And it's just very easy to understand why they use the word system. They use the word systematic review because they want you to just use a system to come about whatever you want to do. And that system enables your paper to have some degree of validity, right? That degree of validity means that, okay, somebody can reproduce it somewhere in the world. Somebody could look at what you did and say, oh, you did not just formulate this whole thing or this whole conclusion that you got or this whole theory that you actually really, really got. So it's if you're using a system to generate an answer, to generate a review looking at something, then it becomes a systematic review. And the purpose. So why do you want to do a systematic review? Let's talk from a technical point of view, especially as regards us physicians, right? Either physicians going into patient care, or physician going to academia, or physician going to transition from one level of career growth to another. Let's say, for example, people that are applying for residency. One of the requirements is to get a research paper, right? And it helps the program to measure your degree of scholarly involvement or your degree of interest in scholarly involvement. And not only that, programs are also looking out for people who have interest in research. Why? For several reasons. One, they feel that if you come into the program, you're going to publish a paper. And ACGME, for those in the US, the body that helps to regulate residency programs, they use one of the points to judge a program, it's their scholarly output. So when they come, they want to know if this program is actually doing scholarly output. So your publications help to make the program to retain their residency accreditation, actually. So you see that most programs, even though they don't speak it out, they are quietly looking, okay, this person probably is going to help us do one or two scholarly things over a period of time, or subconsciously they're considering you as a candidate, right? So if you are around this time that we're beginning to wrap up all our research activities, it's difficult to do a prospective design, right? Because a prospective design takes time to create the methodology and go from there. So what we usually fall back to around this time, we have like 3 months, and I've been saying this over and over again in the group, it's most of this literature review, case reports, things that you can produce within a very short time or short period of time, and then systematic review, sometimes meta-analysis if you have the time, right? So it's important to know at what stage of medicine are you and how what are you going to apply? If I'm doing it to actually find out knowledge, which is one of the reasons why we do that systematic review to gain knowledge or to find out a gap in a medical theory, medical practice. For example, we'll be measuring blood pressure on the left hand, and then some people say blood pressure on the right hand, on the left hand is better than on the right hand. And I really want to find out who said this? Why did they say it? What is the outcome? What is the outcome of measuring blood pressure on the left hand and the right hand? I didn't do the research, the primary research. So what I would do is to go and review the literatures. So when I'm reviewing those literatures, so when I'm reviewing those literatures, eventually I'm actually conducting a review. Either I do a scoping review or I'm using a system to look at who said what and who did not say what. So in today, we're going to generate some topics. I generated some topics we're going to use as a practical guide to do a systematic review. Other reasons why you do a systematic review, I've listed them on the slide, and I've left the slide for quite a while. I wouldn't bore you with reading it verbatim, right? But you could do a systematic review to look at guidelines. What were the guidelines? How did these guidelines evolve? You could do a systematic review to look at treatments of failures or treatment modalities. You could do a systematic review to even look at a system or a method of something that was, if that is being in use or a challenge. So several reasons why people do systematic review. I've mentioned the pertinent ones that concern us, especially in this particular group, and how we strategically position ourselves to add some scholarly outputs to our resume and also help our patient population. Um, so let's just I chose a topic while I was presenting this. I generated a topic for myself, right? And let's say we want to do a systematic review on lifestyle. We heard that lifestyle modification helps hypertension, right? So as a researcher, you have to always train yourself to ask this question: how and why? How? Tell me more, right? So in trying to figure out, okay, how does lifestyle intervention uh, uh, help hypertension or help manage hypertension? Is it really significant or non-significant? In what way? How much exercise do I do to reduce my blood pressure by how much? And then you notice that people have actually done those primary researches in the past everywhere, or so many places or so many times. And your duty as a systematic review to look at the existing knowledge. And when you're reading the existing or when you're reviewing the existing knowledge, you'll find out that you'll be discovering gaps, either bias, gaps in terms of bias or gaps in terms of knowledge or something that they did not address. And that is how this prospective designs now come up. We say, oh, wow, they actually did this research only in the Caucasians. They didn't do it in the Black or something like that. That's a typical bias, right? And then you now want to design similar research moving forward. But if you did not look at the previous literatures, it's going to be difficult for you to define and look forward and look for something new, right? Or figure out what gaps or what biases that exist in that particular domain that you want to review. So let's look at this. I think some other person, Dr. Love, you also you are interested in pathology. We can also generate a pathology knowledge and wherever you are, because every class that we hold, I want people to put their hands on scale and generate a topic for yourself. And we're going to use a method to generate that topic, right? Once you're able to generate a topic, I tell people this over and over again. You can also put in your resume. It's a research topic that you conceptualize and you're developing it. Every research topic must not be published. What if you're not able to publish it, right? It adds to your resume. Like this particular topic, people in this academy can also add it to their resume. We're going to work on this topic as a systematic review and then produce it as a group, everyone together, and then probably add it to your resume or whatever, whenever it's ready. And, those that can jump on the publication can jump on it and then we'll publish it. Dr. Love, you see what you are doing. Dr. Love, you're also interested in pathology, right?
Yeah, yes, I am.
Okay.
Good evening, Doctor.
Okay. So let's see. Let's run through quickly. And just design a topic in pathology. Well, so what area of pathology tickles your fancy? Or what area of pathology drives
Hematopathology. Hematopathology.
Hematopathology. Okay. in your sojourn or in your journey in medicine, what about hematopathology? You know, do you want to find out, or or conflict that you discovered something, you know, you're puzzled about?
Um,
So these are the pertinent questions that you ask. Sometimes the ideas they drop from heaven, like they just come in boom. Some other times you're seeing a patient and then you're imagining why do mast cells look like this and why do white cells look like this, right? And then you want to do a systematic review to see how they actually define the picture of the presentations of hematoxylate eosine. I'm just giving an example, random example, right? You can decide to do a systematic review on multiple myeloma and management, for example, right? Or the different pathologic diagnosis, method of diagnosis of multiple myeloma, which is already stated, which is already out there. But remember what we said previously, that you can actually do a research that has already been existing. And then you just put a new dimension. Let's say you could say modern updates in diagnosis of myeloma between 2020 and 2024, right? Because then you look at what new things have changed between that particular time, right? That could be a topic that is in hematopathology that you want to do. But if you have any other thing that we can also think of, just you can unmute because it's all talking session, and then we'll go
oh
into.
yeah. I think that is a good one because I actually, when you asked that question, I just thought of multiple myeloma because majorly one of the hematological cases I see here in my practice. So
Exactly. Exactly.
I
Great.
think that yeah.
Great. So I generated this topic. I followed an acronym, right? I followed a system in my head because I've done it multiple times. And then we're going to go into how do we generate this topic. There's a slide or there's a YouTube, there's a link or video link that we recorded on generating research topics. I'll also share it in the group. But it's simply using the PICO format. We all know what the PICO format is. Give me 1 second. Let me see if I can share that, or if I can get to that particular screen. So we have a topic in multiple myeloma. We have a topic in general medicine. I'll call it general medicine, not necessarily cardiology, because everybody deals with hypertension and lifestyle modification. So I used the PICO format to generate both topics, and subconsciously, right? When you're generating a topic for a systematic review or for anything, for many things, you need to know what population am I doing this? Is it multiple myeloma in the Caucasians, multiple myeloma in the whites and the blacks, multiple myeloma in the US, multiple myeloma around the world? Because if you want to write a very quick systematic review, my secret is to keep the topic as narrow as possible and as few words as possible. 1,800 words is usually my target. I don't use words as target when I'm writing. I just write, but I know that I don't want to talk too much because people get bored, and I've said this over and over again. People get bored. If I say beyond 30 minutes now, find out that you just tune off, you get bored. So keep it as narrow as possible, as narrow. So we're going to pick a population. Multiple myeloma, are you going to use an age group for your population? Are you going to say 18 years and above? Multiple myeloma is 65 years and above. But before you pick that topic, you must have sat down and read about multiple myeloma so that when you are picking a topic, you now use at least some degree of knowledge in the existing knowledge to to create your topic. You can't create a topic if you don't know what is already existing about this multiple myeloma. So for you that want to write about multiple myeloma, I know you're a clinician, probably a hematologist, it would be good to, just brush through your books again and look at multiple myeloma, for example, peak incidence. Because if we're picking a population, let's say females, and it's more common in male, then some editors or some people will justify why do you want to do it in male, except you want to say, hey, multiple myeloma in males, which is less common. I'm just giving an example, right? If you're picking 65 years and above, when it's more common when the peak incidence between 45 and 65, you have to put all these things into consideration in looking at this systematic review on current uh, 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 management guidelines for multiple myeloma, right? So That's the P. For every other person that is trying to generate a topic, so think of a population in your head. First of all, think of a domain. Am I talking pediatrics? Am I talking about neurology? Is it psychiatry? And then you look at what population am I going to measure? What population am I going to focus? Because these are going to be very important in how you generate the paper, which I will eventually show, or how you generate the papers that you're going to review, which I'll eventually go put our hands on the scale and talk about that. After selecting the population in males and females, in 65 and above, the next thing that you're going to look at is, okay, what am I measuring? What is the intervention? What is the comparison? What is the outcome? So what are the variables that I'm going to be looking at when I'm trying to write a systematic review, when I'm trying to review this? Am I looking at diagnosis versus non-diagnosis? Am I looking at let's say in the lifestyle on, for example, hypertension? We're saying lifestyle modifications. Are we looking at exercise, food, and then um, uh, whatever types of fasting, for example? So for me, if I want to do that paper, I have to I'm choosing different lifestyle modifications. There's several lifestyle modifications, physical exercises, and in physical exercises, try to be as specific as possible because there are different types of exercises. There's the strength, the weight strengthening. There's all those different definitions of exercises, and then you just focus on one. Let's say regular walking or 30 minutes recommendation of moderate intensity exercise, and then you define it, right? Or are you talking about weight management programs, or that's for lifestyle modification? Are you talking about stress reduction techniques for lifestyle modification? So you just pick one. If you want to write on all of them, there's also nothing wrong. Now, if you notice that I keep using the word pick one, pick one, pick one. That means the scope of your systematic review actually really, really depends on you. It does not depend on the editor. It does not depend on the program. It does not depend on your audience. It does not depend on your next door neighbor who's trying to tell you that you're trying to get so simple. As a beginner or as an intermediate writer, just focus on one thing: lifestyle modification in brackets, regular exercise routine, or lifestyle modification in bracket, weight management program, or lifestyle modification in bracket, dash diets, for example. What's the topic again? But benefits of lifestyle modification, lifestyle interventions in hypertension management, right? So benefits of hypertension, lifestyle management, lifestyle interventions in hypertension management. And then we're going to put in bracket dash diets, or we're going to put in bracket intermittent fasting, or we're going to put in bracket weight management or weight loss programs, or we're going to put in bracket specific exercises, right? Like strength, like muscle strengthening, or those other different types of exercises that are, or yoga meditation. And then you focus on that, right? And generate your paper. Very, very important. Or else you're going to spend so much time. You're going to spend like so much time. People wonder how we write these papers, and we're always producing papers and coming out with things because we try to be as narrow. And if you read our papers, we try to be as narrow as possible in our scope and get it out of the way. Same thing with comparison. When you're picking your topic, what am I comparing it to? So let's say for you that picked changes in multiple myeloma management and their guidelines, you might want to keep comparison between time intervals, right? Say last decade and this decade, right? For example, that's a comparison. For the people that want to work on the hypertension, they could pick comparisons between, let's just say, people that were using medication versus people that were using that lifestyle, right? So we're doing a systematic review on lifestyle modification, lifestyle interventions on hypertension management. So we're going to look at people who were on DASH diet, or people who were on yoga and meditation, or people who were on exercise routines versus people who were just using only medication, right? So that becomes our comparison group. And then the outcome that you want to measure, right? For you that want to talk on multiple myeloma, you're going to be measuring what's changed, right? And just remember that research, you must not always get a positive what they call it. It must not be a positive. It must not be a positive ending. Your result must not end positive, right? If you're always driving for your result to end positive, then that becomes a bias. So for you that want to do a review of management in multiple myeloma over the last decade or over the last 5 years, you might see that there's nothing changed, and that could be your conclusion that nothing changed in the management. And then you review all those things, and then you put them there, right? And ensure that you just put like, oh, management, basically has remained the same. The use of these versus these has been this, blah, 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 and that becomes your conclusion. For us, in people that want to do lifestyle intervention versus lifestyle intervention, we could just say, hey, that we noticed that DASH diet or whatever we want to use, physical exercises, reduce systolic blood pressure by 20 versus this, right? And that becomes our outcome. That's what we're looking for. Or it did or it did not, right? That becomes what we're looking for. It was inconclusive, or the evidence was overwhelmingly inconclusive, or there were conflicting evidences in the literatures that we saw. You're doing a literature review to actually show knowledge, right? Spread knowledge. You don't have to force it to suit your narrative. If the results were conflicting, just say it like that, that in what I did, in the reviews that I did, the results were conflicting. In what I did, the reviews were positive or negative. You don't really have to bend the rules. So that we talked about outcome and always. Because you were. All right, we'll just continue from what we're saying. And as much as possible, you try to, put a time frame in almost all the things that you want to do. It helps you to be very, very focused. So you don't be you don't be jumping from one place to another. It also helps you when it helps you when you're searching for these studies, right? So you're going to be very defined when you're searching for these studies. So those are like the practical things to do when selecting a topic. And once you have selected a topic, the next thing to do, or before that, there's also what type of study do you want to review? Because in a systematic review, you have to choose what type of studies you want to review. It is usually preferred to review primary studies, right? Because if you are reviewing a review, it's like, reviewing what someone else reviewed, it's like diluting the already diluted stuff, right? So the preferences on primary researches, and if you can also choose randomized control trials. We'll go into the details in 5 minutes or less, and then we go from there. So once you develop a topic, hey, Dr. Love, you can write your topic down, and then we'll follow this particular thing. You can open your laptop or whoever who has also generated a topic. I plan to allow people generate their topics wherever you are. Generate your topic, put it in the chat box, or you can generate a topic based on what we just said now. And just write it down somewhere and follow the process. Before we're done with this particular presentation, you will notice that you would have actually developed almost half of the paper. And then the remaining thing is just to add flesh to it, and you're done. You should be publishing by next week, and which I encourage everyone, every subgroup should publish yourself, no matter how small it is. You feel this sense of gratification, that I actually did this. It may not be perfect, but that's a starting point, right? So for writing a literature review, the systematic review, you have to develop a protocol, right? You have to develop a protocol. So a protocol helps you in your methodology section to say, okay, what am I going to do? How do I generate this paper, number one? Number two, what papers am I generating? Number two, what is my objective? Number three, I've already talked about how do I generate this paper. How do I extract the data from the paper, right? How do I extract that, what I'm looking for, the outcomes, and how do I extract it, and how do I begin to write it? And how am I even sure that this thing that I'm doing is valid? That's what they call quality assessment, right? How do I measure the validity of what I'm doing. Various tools to measure validities. One of the standardized tools is to go to Prospero. There's something they call Prospero. Let me see if I can pull it up. Prospero. Yeah. Give me one moment. So there's the National Institute of Health, right? This is my login. I'll be logging with the National Institute of Health. They kind of help to standardize the things that we do for in America. And then there are so many other ways to standardize what you do. You generate a protocol and you submit it to this website. They're going to look at it and say, okay, someone has already done this before. Why are you wasting your time, right, doing it? Or they're going to look at it and say, hey, can you strengthen this area or can you not strengthen this area? So they're like the gate pass to help strengthen the quality of the review that you want to do. However, the use of Prospero is very also not, some authors use it, some authors, many of the time, I don't usually, the process is usually like 4 to 6 weeks sometimes, or less or more. But it's encouraged for people. Initially, I used it, but it's encouraged for young authors to start using it. It's going to help you because someone is going to be looking at your process behind the scene to tell you, hey, you're doing something right or you're not doing something right. So that's Prospero. And there's so many other tools that you can also use to validate if what you're doing is correct. All right. So once you define your protocol, well, you have to write a little protocol, define what you want to do and the things that you want to include. The next thing is to start doing it, right? And once you start doing it, be making notes on how you did it, because at the end of the day, how you did it becomes the body of the methodology, right? And like I said in the beginning, there are tools now to help you with developing methodologies. There's a tool called, let me see this tool that I use, go to my bookmark. There's this particular tool, let me see, Bristol tool methodology. Let's see this one. All right. I don't know if you guys can see this tool. All right. It's a tool that I use almost all the time, Systematic Review Accelerator, right, to help me organize myself. I impute the population that I want to study. I impute the inclusion and exclusion criteria. We're going to talk about inclusion and exclusion criteria, and I impute so many things, and then it automatically generates my methodology. I click on generate, and it's going to generate my methodology. You guys are free to use it. But like I said, these are all modern tools that you can use, but first understand how to do it normally on your own before you start using all these AIs and all these assistants to do this stuff that you do. So let's assume we're using the hypertension as our topic. What I would do next is to go to, I will choose, now look at the word, I will choose what database to use. Different databases exist. Let me see if I can see that slide again. Different databases. There's a PubMed, there's Cochrane, there's Embase. There's so many databases. I love PubMed so much. It's very easy for me. There's even Google Scholar, right? So easy for me to use PubMed. Let's do the one that I use. And you're free to use anyone. You can use Google Scholar, you can use whatever. Let's just say PubMed, for example. You log in, create your username and password, and you log in. I already have that login. And then you come here. Can everybody see the PubMed window that I pasted?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
sir.
And then you come here. Now, while you're here, before you get into PubMed, you have to generate your search terms. So you want to search for papers that you want to include in your study, right? The person that develops the search terms or the terms that you're going to use is strictly you and you alone. even though that there are search term generators, right? Like I said, there are AIs that can help you to generate search terms, like 10 search terms. But you and you alone know actually what is the objective of your study. Okay, what terms am I going to use to, what terms am I going to add the manual way to generate me papers that will talk about lifestyle modification and hypertension reduction. Finish. And these search terms I generated it myself. Hypertension, lifestyle intervention, dietary modification, blood pressure reduction. You can generate as many as you can in your head looking at that topic, say, because I'm actually trying to look at lifestyle intervention. So what like exercise, blood pressure reduction, blood pressure, weight loss, and all those whole things. So when you come to PubMed, you click on advanced, and then you begin to put hypertension, your search term, right? And then there are some terms at this particular place that are called bowling, or they have different technical names that you can use, right? You can either use hypertension and you put another thing, exercises, and then you add it, right? Or you can use hypertension with or without, and or with, or whatever combination. And then you can try as many combinations as possible. So remember what I said, whatever steps you're using, first I include hypertension and I use the various combinations. Those steps that you are doing, you're going to write it in your methodology section because you want your results to be reproducible. You want someone to say, hey, so when someone says, oh, this result, you manipulated it, you want to be say, hey, just follow my steps, step by step, and you're going to generate the same thing that I generated, right? And then you search. And when you search, the papers are all going to pull up over 200 and something paper. I know many of us are used to this. And so I won't go through the other search terms, just particular days. And then you can also do that in the other Google Scholar, other search, other bases, right? And then your Google Scholar, you still do the same thing. You use advanced search, and then you do the same thing that I was doing in PubMed. Now in PubMed, we are advised to review recent papers. So I want to review uh, between 20, let's say between the last 10 years. So 2014, so I'm selecting 2014. Now, these papers that I want to include are going to be appearing in my inclusion criteria because if you are doing a systematic review, you have to have what they call an inclusion and exclusion criteria. So I'm including papers written within the past 10 years. I'm going to include either papers that has abstract on full text. On this side, I'm clicking abstract on full text. As I'm clicking on them, the results will be going lower and lower and lower. I'm going to include papers that were randomized control trials. That's primary research. It also depends on you can decide to put meta-analysis or whatever, but it's recommended I will just keep it to primary studies. And then you can add other filters, additional filters. You click on additional filters. I think I've gone through this. Studies have to be male and females, types of studies, adaptive clinical trial phase 1. If you don't want, just leave it blank, and so on and so on. Age, because we've already added that in our inclusion criteria, we'll put our age between, let's say, 65 and above. Let's say, how does it? Because that's like where hypertension usually peaks, right? In the elderly. So, and then others. And I click on show. It's going to reduce this to 459 papers. That means you're going to review 459 papers, right? These particular steps that you're taking, you have to show the editors or whoever that is interested in your paper how you took those steps. And now we usually use the Prisma generators, the Prisma diagram to do that. This is the Prisma checklist. This is how it looks like. Let me see if I can open it. Prisma flow diagram. And there are different Prisma flow diagrams for different purposes. Let's see this one. And most journals adopt this Prisma flow diagram because this Prisma flow diagram helps them to actually say, oh yeah, she actually used a system. Remember, you're doing a systematic review, not a scoping review, so that you actually use a system to generate whatever you're generating. So the records that you identified in the database, if you use a registry or register, there are different also types of register depending on what you're doing. And then in that records that we identified, you will notice that some of them are duplicates already, right?
I'm curious to make your claim.
You can also download this particular file. So what I do is I download it. There's a download button somewhere. This particular file that I generated. Yep. You can save it. You can email it to yourself. You can send it to yourself, clipboard, or whatever. And then you look for duplicates. For example, I may have published this paper in Curious, and then somewhere, let's say, another repository that is also archived in PubMed will also feature me, and then I'll have duplicates of this particular paper. Or let's say I did an update on this particular paper, it becomes a duplicate, right? So your Prisma flow, you will look out for those duplicates and remove them. Now, there are AIs that can also help you look out for those duplicates and also tell you, oh, this particular paper is a duplicate, and then you remove all of them, right? Citation tools, very popular citation tools can help you do that. Simple grammar, not Grammarly, Qbot can also help you do that. Those are tools that I also use to help me look out for duplicates. So I copy what I downloaded and I paste it on Qbot citation generator. And then it's going to tell me a lot of duplicates that are there. And I put those duplicates. So the system that I followed, identifying the primary research in the databases, and then I started screening them if they met my inclusion and exclusion criteria. For your inclusion and exclusion criteria in the methodology section, these are, you generate your inclusion criteria yourself, right? You generate your inclusion criteria based on, are we supposed to use one database or multiple databases? A good question. So if you have followed me carefully, you notice that it is you define, you define, you define, you define. As long as you are stating it in your methodology that I used a single database, you can use a single database. You must not use a multiple database. You can just review only 20 papers. You must not review 490 papers. There's no law that says you review 600 papers. However, in your inclusion and your exclusion criteria, you have to have a system, an already predefined system of how you decided that you're going to review 20 papers. Let's say you don't have access to 300 of those papers because not every of these papers, let's go back there. Not every of these papers do you have access to, right? Also, let's just say, for example, if you notice some of them are paid, this is free. I go back again. This is also free full text. All right, some of the papers you don't have free full text, so you cannot exclude them. You can't review a paper that you're not looking at. And then those papers, the way you excluded some of these papers will eventually become, you eventually write this as part of your limitation because you have a limitation. You do not have access to all the papers that you use. I hope that answered your question. All right, we'll quickly go because we want to wrap up in like 2 minutes and then we'll move on. So you define who creates the inclusion and exclusion criteria. A typical inclusion and exclusion criteria is what we just went through. You included years, you included studies that are randomized control trial, included studies that were done in humans, included studies that focus on hypertension and hypertension reduction and exercises or DASH diets. And then you excluded every other thing. If that thing is talking about hypertension reduction and weight loss, for example, let's say you were using DASH diet as your lifestyle intervention, or you're using intermittent fasting. So if that paper is talking about hypertension and weight loss, It doesn't apply. That becomes the exclusion criteria. If that paper is talking about hypertension, reduction of hypertension using pharmacotherapy, right? Then you have to exclude it because there are so many papers. If you look at these papers that you generated, you find that there's so many papers there. And sincerely, you can do this in one night. Like when I wake up by 2 a.m., when I usually wake up every night, and I just begin to look at these papers, probably because I've done it over and over again, right? For you who's just starting, 2 of you or 3 of you divide these papers into like 50, 50, 50. You should be able to exclude as many and then narrow down to 20 and review them. Does it matter how many number of papers we review? No, it does not matter. It now depends on who's your supervisor. Let's say your professor wants you to review 500 papers. Okay, fine, because they want you to increase the power of your study, right? Remember how we started? What is your motive of writing this paper? If you are writing to share knowledge, you're writing to get move from one trajectory to another, and different reasons why you're writing. You just have to weigh yourself and just be real to yourself and say, hey, this is what I want to do. And then you can actually make sense out of just 20 papers. It must not be 300 papers. So it could be your first phase, you did a preliminary review, and this is what my finding, and then you publish it, and then you now say, okay, well, next I'm going to do 500 paper review with my team, and I'm going to publish it. And next we're going to do 10,000 paper database review, and then we're going to publish it. So you could move in steps by step. My preliminary result, my 20 review showed this. Let's see if we increase the power of this study, if we're going to generate the same answer or the same result, and so on and so on. All right. So you see how much time I wasted on the methodology, because if you do the methodology right, you will generate the number of papers that is going to be easy for you to work on, to discuss. The next thing is now to just do the data extraction. Something I missed in the beginning, the spectrum of systematic review covers also meta-analysis, because in meta-analysis, you're also going to use the same system to generate papers. The difference between the simple systematic review and then the meta-analysis are in meta-analysis, you are now, for quantitative research, I'm not talking about qualitative research, you are now analyzing outcomes, like you're analyzing the p-values that were generated in lifestyle modification and hypertension reduction in this study versus the p-value that was generated in lifestyle modification and hypertension reduction in the other study versus the p-value or the confidence intervals, or at what confidence, or the forest plot, or whatever you want to use, whatever you're meta-analyzing, right? Because in meta-analysis, you're analyzing raw data, outcome data, like final data, right? Final data, not data, like data, final data, right? So that's that spectrum. We're not talking about meta-analysis component, but we're talking about the systematic writing review, the simple systematic review. So you get your 20 papers, you already have your objective in mind, you already know, you already have a preset of where your outcome is going to lie, either they reduce hypertension or they did not reduce hypertension. For the person that is writing on guideline, did the guideline change or did the guideline did not change? Or is there a new addition, and what was the new addition? So you start looking at the papers individually. First I do is what I call abstract screening, right? Talk about those and the rest. Qualitative, I'll talk about it. All right. So I look at those people, I do what they call abstract screening. Why was this study done? What's the objective? What is the conclusion? In my abstract screening, I'll be able to categorize and bring out subheadings. That's what I do. Different people have different approaches. And then, as I'll say it again, the softwares and the AIs can do an amazing work for you. But we're looking at the traditional model for the now. So if I look at abstract screening, I'll be able to say, okay, let's say I'm doing exercises. So what did they do? How did they do it? What was the result that was obtained? And I can categorize this, how exercise 30 minutes, exercising strength, muscle strengthening for 30 minutes, and how it reduces blood pressure. And the next one will become bricks walking and blood pressure reduction. And the next title will become weightlifting and blood pressure reduction, because I'm writing on exercises. And the next heading will become whatever type of exercise, let's say push-ups and reducing blood pressure, right? And then because I did abstract screening, I just looked at the abstract, I'll be able to focus. Okay, these ones are talking about weight. This one's are talking about push up. This one is talking about muscle strengthening. This one is talking about whatever. And I just categorize them. I've really focused myself on exercise, and I've generated like 5 subheadings in my discussion. And I'll go on what each person's finding was. John et al., and there's a video that we went through, spent like 1 hour discussing on how to make research statements and what research statements that you don't make. And then someone asked me over the weekend, okay, yes, I've made this research statement, but they don't look so fine, and they don't look so refined, they look so coarse. Good, you've made advance, at least you've made an effort. First thing you do when you're writing a research statement, when you're writing the body of the research, is to write it the way it comes in your mind. Don't bother about semantics, about language formation, about correctness or not correctness. There's this group of doctors that worked in Thailand. The group of doctors, they looked for how much exercises one will be exercises. They compared exercising in these versus exercising and walking 30 minutes, and they saw that it reduced blood pressure by this. They measured it over 6 years, and the mean blood pressure was so, right? That is what is just in my head. I did not bother whether it sounded sweet, sounded scholarly, it did not sound scholarly. And just make those statements everywhere. And then you move to the next paper because you're doing a systematic review, right? And then you have an objective in mind. The objective, as you're writing those statements, you have to be focusing on the objective so you don't go off on that objective. At the end of the day, you come back to these tools also that can help you refine the terminologies. For example, Quillbots, for example. I'm not advertising any tool. They didn't pay me for anyone. I don't want to mention any of their names, right? You just plug in them and just click on make it formal, and it will formalize it, and it will become so clean and so crystal. And you'll be like, oh, wow, I never thought of this way. But for traditional writers like us, the more you write, the more you see that you can actually write almost close to them, but you can't beat these AIs. Honestly, you really can't. I'm sorry about people who are biased against AIs, but really you can't beat it. If you are going to use an AI in your write-up, you have to declare it. That's a new thing that's going on now. You have to declare it to the editors that you use, an assistant as an AI to do whatever you want to do. But it's pretty much very, very cool generating these ideas. And then the last part of it is to write a conclusion or whatever you find. I have a template here. Let me see if I can pull up this template of, and this template, you can find it online, you can find it everywhere, of how the body or the flow of a systematic review can be. I don't know if people can see this particular page. If you can see it, just say yes on the chat. So I know that.
Yes.
So the title page, like this tool is online. You can download it. And then your abstracts, we're going to talk about how to write an abstract, the structured abstract and the non-structured abstract in another section, right? And then the methodologies, I've already given you softwares, and so there's so many other software that can help you with your methodologies. But you can actually write a methodology yourself. Every step you took. First methodology was I had a meeting with my team, which are you guys, 50, 500. And then we decided on this topic following the PICO criteria. And we generated our mesh terms, which are not our mesh terms, our search terms, which are A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And then we use Bolinger links. We decided to use PubMed because we felt that PubMed had a wider coverage, a broader reach, or cover the population that we want to study, which is the US, right? Most of the papers that are deposited in PubMed cover the population. And then we used, we generated inclusion and exclusion criteria. We decided to measure studies from the past 10 years before, like for 2024 upwards. And then we'll list all our inclusion criteria that we listed, and then we'll list our exclusion criteria. And the next step was to generate these papers. We use these search terms and these bowling words in this order and in this preference, all right? And then we started, we input, you say, all right, what AI tool do you use to refine your statement? Okay, like I said, I'm not going to mention any AI tool because I'm recording this and I'm going to share it online. We could talk about it when we're done Zooming, but I've mentioned one of them by mistake. But they don't pay me anything. I don't want them to sue me or sue us. We'll talk about it, right? So you write your methodology, after your methodology, your key findings, and that's it. Introduction, objective, method, same thing. Eligibility, inclusion criteria. We've already talked about your start strategy, your study selection strategy, and how you extracted your data. In how you extracted your data, you can decide to use, okay, Dr. Saloko extracted the first 20 data, and then I extracted the second 20 data, and then we use a internal blind review. If you look at how every time we're looking for someone or some bias to review our paper, blindedly. And we use someone internally to also review and validate our findings so that it doesn't look as if what I'm doing, I'm biased. But at the end of the day, no matter how much biased you want to be, or how much unbiased you want to be, you find out that there's lots of biases that exist, which you're going to also frankly and simply state in your in 1 second. You sincerely and frankly state it in your statement, in your limitation sections. It could be selection bias because you selected the number of years, right? You didn't go beyond that. It could be conclusion bias. You were looking at the ones that gave you positive and you don't look at the ones that gave you negative. It could be and so many other bias, lead time bias, lag bias. This particular lecture is not to talk about, bias and no bias and so many biases that you looked at. You probably also error in measurements, all the potential bias that you could actually look out for when you're doing the study. The aim of, or not, one of the ethical principles in doing this research is not to deceive people, you don't have anything to gain falsifying any information, right? Just say the way it is. He who wants to gain from the knowledge will gain from the knowledge. After all, there are also 1,000 more knowledge similar to what you've written. You're just adding to the body.
Did you figure it out? Okay. I found the smaller heads, if that helps.
All right, you're just adding to the body of knowledge. And that's how to actually practically do a systematic um, um, review. The other components of now strengthening using stroke, yeah, some guidelines to like what Dr. Saloko, Dr. Love is asking, not Saloko, Dr. Love, using a scoring system. I mean, you can use it, but the generalizability or the acceptability of this particular thing, because the research world is evolving and the guidelines are just, I'll use the word everywhere, right? We'll try as much as possible to follow the principles of good clinical practice, especially those that are taught by NIH, right? Or you find out that someone else that's doing review somewhere else may not be bound by NIH laws and NIH system. So they're not going to even use scoring systems, different scoring systems. And I listed a couple of them, right? I just skipped it. Is it important? Yes, it helps you to strengthen. Let me just see if I can pull it up in 1 second. It helps you to strengthen the quality of your work. For example, this is one, right? The stroke checklist is one scoring system that you use, right? So the stroke checklist in doing either a systematic review or conducting observational studies, right? These are all points that you have to tick and then go through them to be sure that you touched almost on everything: background rationale, objective, study design, setting, participants, variables, the data source, the biases, and all and all and all. And there are so many other reporting, objective biases and scoring systems that you're going to use that can help validate your systematic review. I hope I try to make it as simple as possible. Thank you for listening. We've really went through 1 hour of how to practically put your hands on your computer and write a systematic review. And for those who already know about this topic, it might not be an addition to your knowledge. For those who are new, I encourage everyone, this stuff is like really, really easy because it is you driven. You are not bound to systematic analyze 300 papers. You're not bound to systematic analyze 1 million papers, right? Use your inclusion and exclusion criteria wisely and narrow down to the number of papers that you're going to report and analyze them. And then simply, sincerely, and truthfully, like all of us, report it in your methodological section, your methodology section, how you narrow down to 20 papers or 15 papers and how you analyze them. And then a stronger author like me may criticize you and say, oh, the strength of your study is not enough because you analyze 10, you're supposed to analyze 500. This topic is common or whatever. Well, I use the word, okay, fine. Maybe in my next update, I'm going to improve my number, right? It is actually you driven. As long as you use some of those checklists that have been provided by the governing body of your country, like in the US, we're using the NIH. And there's a study that I want to also introduce people to, the IPPR study. Thank you so much. And if you have questions, I'm going to stop this recording so that we don't go beyond time. You can ask me a question.